have the pleasure and honor of serving as the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Texas. We've come over today from Tyler to be with our friends and neighbors here in Gregg County and in Longview to talk about some important law enforcement initiatives and some work that's being done by the federal grand jury. I want to recognize, you see behind me a lot of folks that you're familiar with, but I want to recognize these law enforcement officials for two reasons. Folks have been arrested and they're going to be prosecuted, but another part of the story is the hard work of the agents and the officers. I actually enjoy coming to these press events because that's what I want to shed a light on. That's the real story. The successes that we mark today and look forward to in the future are really because of the extraordinary cooperation between the many agencies and really dozens of local, state, and federal agents and officers. I want to introduce to you some of the folks that have been particularly significant in this investigation because they deserve it. We've got I've just met him today, but he's already a good friend to me, and we're going to be hanging out together for quite a bit. The Police Chief, Mike Bishop, here from Longview. We have ATF Agent Russ Morrison. Brent Chambers from the FBI is here. My attorney in charge from Tyler, Jim Middleton, who's actually heading up this prosecution. There are some other folks here. I've got a long list that will make me not forget. DEA is here. They actually are assisting. And then, of course, we have Sheriff Maxie Serliano, the county judge, Bill Stout, and then the mayor, Andy Mack. Many of these folks will speak to you briefly after I finish, but I did have some prepared remarks that I wanted to share with you. We're going to answer some questions as well. Those of you that have been in these press events know that there are certain rules. We'll have to stick within the four corners of the indictments, and there are 3 indictments we want to talk about. One of those indictments actually, as I'm speaking to you, perhaps we'll hear a word, just involves one defendant, but that's still under seal by the court, and under the court rules we won't be able to talk about that, but there are 3 indictments. We're announcing today for the citizens who live here in Longview and then for the surrounding communities these indictments that were returned by a federal grand jury meeting in Tyler last month. The investigators have successfully apprehended up to 16 defendants. There is one fugitive. There's a man named James Lamar Fountain who is from Longview. He's a black male, 34 years old, and we have a picture of Mr. Fountain that we'll be glad to share with the media. We need Mr. Fountain to surrender himself immediately. He's charged in a federal indictment, and we have not apprehended him yet. Besides Mr. Fountain, though, everybody else is in custody, and many of them have already had their initial appearances. Some are in Tyler today as well, getting court dates. These defendants are charged with conspiring to distribute methamphetamine. They've also charged with possessing firearms in connection with distributing that methamphetamine, the actual substantive offenses of distributing methamphetamine, and in many instances we've discovered these defendants have long criminal records. And when the evidence is consistent with such, we've charged them with being felons in possession. So we've collected a lot of firearms. Our specific goal in this case was not only to put a dent in the methamphetamine trafficking here in this area, but specifically targeting folks that we believe are violent offenders, who are part and parcel of some of the uptick that we've seen in violent crime here in Gregg County. Now, we don't have a fancy nickname for this operation. A lot of federal cases have code names, but actually this is just the first of several enforcement efforts that the U.S. Attorney's Office and my federal agency partners are committed to accomplishing with the Longview Police Department and the Gregg County Sheriff's Office until this violence that we've seen spike up here recently subsides. I want to speak to the level of violence that we're seeing in Gregg County and appeal to the folks who will see these reports, either read them in the newspaper or see them on television. We need your help. You'll learn the names of the defendants in this case, and we're still collecting evidence and information in these cases, but there are other cases where folks here have information for law enforcement. There are unsolved murders here. There are other drug trafficking organizations here. We're going to take them out, and we ask for your assistance in doing so. These groups in charge today, announced today, have been operating with general impunity. That's going to stop. Most of the folks, as I've said, are recidivists, and we're going to stop that as well. As I noted, the defendants have distributed high-grade, almost pure methamphetamine. Many of these occasions they distributed to cooperating individuals, but they've also been stopped in search warrants and in traffic stops, and for that I'm very grateful to the DPS who also have participated in this case. These illicit drugs are poison for the user, but I have to say, in my experience, that methamphetamine is one of the worst I've ever seen. It enslaves the mind and the body of the users, and because the vast majority of this high-level ice methamphetamine is manufactured in Mexico and distributed in the United States by Mexican cartels, the sales proceeds are going back to Mexico, where they fuel the cartel war against the Mexican government and its citizens, and really an unspeakable level of violence. We've got to stop it. The grand jury has also given notice to these defendants that the United States will forfeit tens of thousands of dollars in drug proceeds. There were numerous guns, I think 15 or 16 have been seized so far, that are part and parcel of this meth business, and we will not stop until we forfeit every one of those dollars and seize every one of those guns, as well as any other proceeds that can be traced to this operation. We think we've dealt a crippling blow to these groups. Now let me stop and commend the persistence, really the creativity and the tremendous effort of the officers and the agents in this prosecution. I want to specifically thank the Longview Police Department. Longview PD has faithfully partnered with the U.S. Attorney's Office for as long as I remember, and I go back over 25 years. Chief, thank you very much. You and your predecessors have always been there when we needed you. ATF has led out in this deal. FBI is part of it. These guys have done a great job in shepherding the investigation to this point. We can't do our job without partnering. I don't think the PDs these days, with the threats that they're facing, can do their job without partnering with us. And so this is a good deal because we've done this for a long time. Now you can get sort of lost in the alphabet soup. I said DEA was involved, DPS was involved, but I want the citizens who also will see these articles, see the reports on the news, to know that you do have outstanding law enforcement, committed, well-trained law enforcement. In this instance, there have been a countless number of hours that have gone in to get the case to this point. But I have to say there's a lot more work to do before we finish. Now, the rules are, and this is true, we're in the United States of America. You're presumed innocent and not found guilty until a jury has decided that. And so this is just an indictment. It's the first step in many steps until we hold these folks accountable. But right now, every one of the defendants are presumed innocent, and they're going to stay that way until a jury says otherwise. But I can tell you that the agents and the officers have carefully, I think, put together a very compelling case, and we are looking forward to presenting the evidence to a jury of East Texans later this summer. Now, we are spending a lot of time in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we stretch from the Gulf of Mexico up to Oklahoma and over to Arkansas and Louisiana, thinking and talking and strategizing and filing cases combating the Mexican cartel. I really feel like they are the existential threat against Texas. That's my main focus. But we cannot and we will not ignore the threat in our own backyard that we see here in Gregg County and in Longview and other cities really in nearby East Texas. The press release makes reference to gang violence, to the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. Those are homegrown problems, and we will address those homegrown problems. The methamphetamine, as I've mentioned, is highly addictive, very dangerous, and it is fueling an untold misery for the folks that are using it, for the family members that love those people, and really hurting our cities and neighborhoods. Now, I've already made mention, and really 6 weeks ago, some of the lawyers in my office attended a community meeting. A lot of people think that law enforcement, it's really a difficult situation. You're either too hard or you're not hard enough. Let me say this. We have heard the message from the vast majority of citizens here in Longview that they want their safe city back, and we're going to work as hard as we possibly can to give it to them. In that regard, I can commit to you that we're going to follow the Constitution. We're working very carefully with law enforcement, not just in Longview, but in all these cities. We hear the news, we see the reports where people are disaffected with law enforcement. And I can tell you, as a career law enforcement officer myself, that you have great police officers here in Longview who are committed to protecting the Constitution and the rights of Americans and the people who live here. But they're also committed to the mission that is first and foremost for every law enforcement officer. That is to protect the lives and property of its citizens. We're going to do that. There have been field surveillance for hours. There have been on interviews of witnesses, both cooperating and otherwise. And frankly, as the U.S. Attorney, I'm very pleased to be included in this effort. It's an honor for us to be involved. And I say this all the time, but it remains the truth. We have a long way to go. I've been the U.S. Attorney now for 7 years, and I've done many of these press conferences, and I sort of catch myself going, well, if the newspaper was there at the last one, they heard me say the same thing. You know, we're not giving up. We're going to fight and win the war on drugs. But we can't give up. We're not going to give up. The stakes are too high, and the consequences of failure are unthinkable. So we are looking forward to what we believe will be speedy justice for these defendants, and we're not done yet. The investigation will continue. And again, I appeal to the citizens here who know who the criminals are, who has committed these acts of violence. Please contact your local district attorney, your local police department, the sheriff's office. Your information will be protected. We're very good at that, and we will stay here until the work is done. Now, I have some folks that want to share some information with you as well. As I mentioned, Chief Bishop has been working with us for some time now, and I want to call on Chief Bishop, and then there'll be some other folks. After that, we'll be happy to answer a few questions. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Bales. I, too, want to start out by thanking all the different agencies that have participated in this investigation. As you can see, we have a number of agencies and a number of agents here that work for those different agencies that have a long-standing history of working together to combat criminal activity. Several weeks ago, I went over and met with the U.S. Attorney's Office to seek their assistance with our violent crime issues, and have been also working with the Gregg County District Attorney Carl Durrow as well. Since the summer of last year, numerous arrests have been made of individuals involved in drug and gang activity. These indictments today are a continuation of our efforts in addressing violent crimes here in Longview. These federal indictments today are a result of multiple agencies working together. The Longview Police Department is committed to partnering with our local, state, and federal agencies, which is paramount to combating our violent crimes. I'd also like to encourage our citizens to communicate with police on any unsolved crimes to which they may have knowledge. Your information can make a difference in helping us with our efforts. I'd also like to extend a gratitude of thanks to the men and women in law enforcement who go out there every day to serve and protect our local communities here in the East, not only here in Longview, but in the East Texas area. These indictments here today will show you a little bit about the individuals that our officers have to deal with on a daily basis. And for that, I am thankful that we have men and women that will go out there and put themselves in harm's way to help make our communities safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor Mack?
U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, ATF, DEA, DPS, Sheriff's Office, County Judge, and of course our LPD. I want to applaud the coordination of multiple agencies involved in order to secure and make Longview safer. On October 5th of last year, we held a press conference letting you, the residents of Longview, know that we were working hard to eradicate the crime in our community. In that meeting, I assured you that we would be working hard to end our gang and crime problem, and it would take cooperation between multiple departments of law enforcement, our judicial system, our residents, and I am pleased to stand before you today thanking these agencies for doing just that. I stated we have a crime and a drug problem, and we're going to stop it. I'm sure there have been times that you have wondered what steps were being taken to secure our city. And now we can share with you that these arrests are some of the pieces of the puzzle to solving our public safety issue. You see, on the surface, it may look like nobody is working. But to protect our officers and to officially investigate and arrest these criminals, discretion has to be used in what information is shared with the public. As a city and as a police department, we want to be as transparent as possible while also being as effective as possible. We can't always reveal every tactic being used to fight crime, but as evidenced by this news conference today, you can rest assured that every effort is being made by our men and women in law enforcement to make Longview a safe place and keep criminals off the streets. I stated in October that this was not an army of people working against Longview, but a handful of people causing trouble, and we were flushing them out one at a time, and we will not rest until that job is done. We are not resting. Now, because of these agencies, their diligence, Longview is a safer place to live. Thank you to each agency and each department involved, and thank you to the citizens for your support and your encouragement. Together, Longview, we will win. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Judge Stout.
Thank you. I would just like to say on behalf of Gregg County, a big thanks to our federal partners, to the law enforcement agencies of the city of Longview and Gregg County. But when one community hurts in this county, we all hurt as a county as a whole. What goes on in one community affects all the communities in this county. And I will assure the public that there's no resources that we will limit from the Sheriff's Department to continue to partner with our city partners and our federal partners to do away with what's been taking place here in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Sheriff?
Well, good morning. As you've heard today, we continue to make progress, and we do that by working together, not only with our local partners, but our partners with federal and state law enforcement agencies. And let me remind you, this is not the first time we've stood together, not only on this investigation, but other investigations as well. And it has to do with the commitment of all involved to do the right thing. It has to do with the commitment and the resolve that we have to make our community safer and to ensure the safety of our citizens. So while we release the information today, let me assure you the work does continue. We continue to work with our partners, both locally, state and federal, and because of the relationships that we have, we will continue to work together, and there'll be other things down the road where we will make continued progress. We remain committed. We stood here before in this very room back in the fall, as the mayor said. Many of y'all have been with us at the courthouse where we've had similar press conferences where we have announced arrest information. We remain committed to the safety of our community, and that's what we intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ, from ATF, Russ Morrison.
Good morning. My name is Russ Morrison. I'm a senior special agent representing the ATF Dallas Division. And on behalf of ATF, I wanted to remind the citizens of Gregg County that ATF stands committed in the fight against violent crime. I was an agent here in East Texas for nearly 25 years, and I will tell you this. Some of these men standing behind me, I had the privilege of working with them, even Mr. Bells, over the past quarter century. And I'm proud of this team. ATF will remain committed with its law enforcement partners, no matter if their badge says U.S., State of Texas, Gregg County, or Longview. We're here to make these communities safer. Our work will continue. Thank you.
All right, well, let me just follow up briefly, and then we'll take some questions. Sheriff Soriano made reference to other efforts. And actually, I want to make clear that when the chief came to talk to us, he doesn't, they actually, Longview has been a part with their code unit. They have officers on the DEA task force. They have folks working with ATF, and I believe they're also embedded with FBI. This is the wisdom, the value of that sort of ongoing relationship. So today it's Longview, tomorrow it might be Tyler or Marshall or any of the other communities where the departments have committed to a long-term partnership and investment with federal and state law enforcement. So very pleased to be here. Sorry for what's going on, but we're going to get to the bottom of it. And the folks as the mayor said, who are responsible for this, they're going to be uprooted from this community, and they're going to find themselves in prison for a long time when it's all said and done. All right, I'll be happy to entertain some questions and try to give you information as I can.
All right. Do any of these arrests or indictments have anything to do specifically with any of the murders, the recent murders?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was my question. And I have to be sort of halfway clever with you about that. The investigations do continue into those unsolved murders. And for me to predict that this will lead to the solution of that, I can't yet. And we're following up many leads. Sorry to be so mysterious, but we're not able to announce any sort of breakthroughs yet, except that we're working on it very hard.
So from here, no suspects can be tied to
Can't talk about, all we can talk about are the charges that are filed, which are drug and weapons charges. Y'all are smart folks, though.
As far as gang affiliation, too,
Yeah.
who can we tie to what gangs and all?
There are two distinct groups here. Some are largely African American, some are mostly Anglo. The Anglos are affiliated or members of ABT, Aryan Brotherhood of Texas. I'm not sure if we've labeled the African American defendants, but this is driven by the drug trade. They are violent people, and gang orientation has a big part of that.
Speaking of drug trade, why has this kind of, as of recent, been centered around this area?
I'm not really sure. You know, last time I was here in Longview, we were talking about synthetic drugs and had a pretty good result, although that case is still pending. You know, we've put them out of business. I don't know. We were just talking this morning, and this is a curiosity to me, having seen the devastation of drugs, but really, I've never, you know, if it's not methamphetamine, it's heroin, and now we understand that there's going to be a huge coca uptick because of what's going on in Colombia with the negotiations with the FARC. I mean, there is so many moving pieces in this. And frankly, I would say, and I'm not telling you all, or certainly the health folks anything, we can't prosecute our way out of this. I mean, the appetite for narcotics in America seems to be insatiable. And for whatever's going on, the Mexicans have tapped into that. This methamphetamine, this particular kind of methamphetamine, this is what we've seen now for the last 5 years or so, is called ice. It's made in industrial-grade labs in Mexico. You rarely see the sort of homegrown, you know, meth problem that we used to see a decade ago. And so highly addictive, very inexpensive, now cheaper than it was 5 years ago, really flooding the United States. And so I think it's easy access, it's a high-impact narcotic, but you have to ask the folks that are using this. I mean, I despair about it because it's a twofold thing, isn't it? Supply and demand. And the demand is off the charts. And I would just say this to people. There are all kinds of facilities that can give help, but honestly, for folks that think smoking marijuana is not a big deal or a little bit of cocaine, I mean, all that money is going to Mexico. And really, we talk about what's going on in the Middle East, and surely that's a concerning thing, and the devastation that's happening in Syria and Iraq. But, you know, it's been going on in Mexico now for the last 10 years. I mean, there have been over 100,000 people murdered in Mexico by these cartels. And really, if they had their way, they would run the whole country. That is being fueled by American dollars, going back to Mexico because we like our marijuana, we love our cocaine, we love our methamphetamine. It's got to stop because these guys working as hard as they cannot address the appetite. And if there's a will, there's a way. That's why we're doing some things in my office to try to even strike more quickly and more advantageously. We're working with the Colombians. We've actually extradited Colombians. We've been extraditing Mexicans. But once it gets here in Gregg County, really we're fighting an uphill battle. And that doesn't mean we're giving up. As I said, we're going to take these folks out. They're going to prison where they belong. But you know, I don't know how to answer that. It's a spiritual problem, I think. You know, folks, you know, why do they want to get high all the time?
So I guess no specific reason as to why this area is special. Or...
This area isn't special. I think it's all over. And actually, if we were on the East Coast or in the New England or the upper Midwest, we'd be talking about the massive spike in heroin overdose deaths. I mean, honestly, you know, why do Americans take as many opioid medications as they do? This is a national dilemma that we're facing, and frankly, law enforcement is only one part of the puzzle, and it's not the solution. We've got to change the way we think about drugs.
Okay, 2 more questions, then I'll pass on.
All right.
As far as any arsons that have been going on, can you tie any suspects
Yeah.
here to those kind of things? Because there's been a lot.
Yeah, I understand that. What I can tell you, generally speaking, is we do believe that the drug trafficking is fueling a lot of this business. A lot of the arsons seem to be related to that, but that is part of the ongoing ATF, FBI local investigation to get to the bottom of that. The chief and I were just talking about the recent execution-style murder. Those are similarly, we believe, drug-related, and so this is the first of many steps that we're taking to find out who's doing this and take them out of the community.
Okay, last question. As far as the Aryan Brotherhood, can you elaborate a little more on that? And
Yeah.
is this a recent group that came in? Where are they from? Can
Yeah.
you just give me some more details?
Aryan Brotherhood Texas is a prison-related gang. We've done several prosecutions of them. They are an offshoot of the California Aryan Brotherhood, and if you talk to most TDC officials, they would say the ABT are the most powerful prison gang in the state prison system. They're also heavily involved in the federal prison system now, and what is happening is that when they are released eventually, and we do want folks to not be in prison for the rest of their lives unless they deserve it, but a lot of these folks are being released. If you know anything about the ABT, they have a system of you're patched in for life, and so while it thrives in prison and doesn't do that well in the free world, they're still ABT members. And ABT members support themselves and also support their brothers in prison by selling drugs, by committing robberies, by extorting folks, and the methamphetamine seems to be their drug of choice. They often use it themselves. And that's why we're seeing the ABT be such a big part of the methamphetamine trafficking in the United States and certainly in Texas.
Sir, how are you able to describe the relationship between these two entities here in town, the African Americans and the ABT?
Yeah,
And
well,
the cartels.
sure, there is a, I'm
Are
sorry,
cartel
that's not
people
supposed to
come
happen.
town? Are cartel people coming to Longview?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this, to say, we're not there yet. That's the objective of the case, is to trace back the sources for these drugs. But we know from the type of methamphetamine that the officers are seizing, that they're finding on the roads, that this is methamphetamine made in Mexico. And all the methamphetamine that's coming in this area is from Dallas, Texas. And I do know that the cartel elements are heavily infiltrated into Dallas, Texas. And so I'm not surprised. We're not there yet. Certainly if we were, we would announce it. But these folks have made connections either through prison or just by going to Dallas and met people to be sources of supply. And so that is our next, that's the logical objective, is find out where this methamphetamine is coming from. And honestly, you know, the ABT says that they're white supremacists and the African Americans have their views or whatever. It's all one color when it comes to drugs. It's green, it's money. And so they somehow happen to have alliances for that.
Well,
Yes, sir.
Just for clarification, because I heard you said it earlier, the execution-style murders, are we talking about those 2 most recent ones?
Yes.
Okay, just to make sure on that one. Also, now you said that the ATF, the DPS, and everybody, there have been organizations involved in cracking down on this, but my focus is right now on the people. So how can you describe to me the people's involvement in cracking down on this as well? Has it been helpful? Has it been not so helpful at all?
You talking about the citizenry?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you know, what I know is that, and I see some folks here in the audience that are the kind of people we're talking about. We went to a meeting 6 weeks ago. I say we did. I wasn't able to attend it, but my first assistant and the criminal chief came and visited with citizens. And actually the meeting was scheduled to discuss certain concerns that some of the citizens had about civil rights violations and their relationships with the police department, which is something we're very involved with. And we don't just prosecute folks who break the law, we protect the Constitution. and folks' civil rights in that regard. So we showed up, which we'll always show up for those kind of things. It was interesting. There was a discussion about that, and there was some, we're doing a training, doing a training in Tyler for law enforcement. There'll be over 125 officers getting civil rights training here in a couple of weeks. But that meeting quickly evolved into a discussion about what are we going to do about the level of violence here in Longview, the gang violence, the drugs that people were seeing. And that's what I mean. We are getting information from people who know. I guess what I'm saying is that people are, for whatever reason, fearful, mixed up loyalties, but any person that knows anything about the unsolved murders that have been reported in the police, in the newspapers, in the television news, we can protect you. There are rewards available. You want to do something to reclaim your community, do it. Step forward. You don't have to be identified. The officers and the agents are very clever about developing alternative ways to corroborate what your information would provide. And that's one of the reasons why I'm having this press conference today, is to appeal to people who know, who have clues, who know where the guns are that were used, who set the fires. Come forward. We will protect you.
Now, you said that you believe that you put a dent into their drug operation.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to elaborate that. How much of a dent do you think that was put into their drug?
Well, the actual amount of drugs, I think you see it in your press packages, really not that much. It's less than a kilo of methamphetamine, but that's part and parcel of the particular way that the evidence was collected in this regard. We've used some cooperating witnesses to make controlled purchases. Some search warrants were run. And I can tell you from experience, I can't say, and I'm not saying that these people are gigantic traffickers. They are persistent traffickers who have been a problem here for a long time. And one of the things that we're looking for is who are the folks that are using guns with their drug trafficking? Who are the folks that are just the recidivist offender who's been to prison already 2 or 3 times? These are these kind of folks that we've targeted in these particular indictments. But if you seize or collect a kilo of methamphetamine, I can guarantee you it's just a tip of the iceberg for what they're actually responsible for. So in that situation, what we're looking for are 2 things. One, they're going to be, hopefully, by the courts, after they have a hearing, detained until they have a trial. So they won't be on the street bothering Longview. They're going to have their cases resolved, and we believe, because the evidence is strong, that they're going to be convicted. Second is the notion that folks will perhaps see what's happened to these individuals and stop trafficking in methamphetamine. That has some residual effect as well. And finally, what we're actually hoping for is that these defendants themselves will begin cooperating. We never say never, and rarely say never. These people have information. They've been selected specifically because, not only because they're problem violators, but we think that they can help the investigation. And so they'll have an opportunity, like most defendants in the federal system, to cooperate and help themselves. So we'll see.
Okay. I believe this is my last question, but in terms of the drug bust and the criminal activity, is there a geographical pattern that's going on here in Longview?
There's a weird, I would say weird because it's inconsistent with how folks are in East Texas. I'm from Nacogdoches. Some of our guys are from Tyler. This is an unusual spike, an aberration in violence that you might see this in the big cities. We don't see this at home, right? But we're seeing it. And if it's gangs, if it's rival drug territory fighting, we're going to get to the bottom of it. And so that's why we're over here. And we're going to stay over here working on these cases until we feel like it's subsided dramatically. So, but I don't know why. I don't know. Longview is a great place to live, a great place to raise their families, but we're having a problem right now. We're going to do something about it.
Can you repeat the name of the suspect who is still outstanding?
Yes, I sure can. I don't have it memorized. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Yes. James Fountain, and I can't read my writing on the middle name here, James Lamar Fountain. He's 34 years old, he's African-American, and he's from Longview. And if you will take some time, I believe we've got a photograph of Mr. Fountain. And of course, we appeal to Mr. Fountain to surrender himself as soon as possible. You can come here to the Longview Police Department or to the courthouse in Tyler.
And then just last question, have you found any leaders in these gangs? And have you captured them, or do you know anything?
Yeah, you know, typically the clue to understanding most federal indictments, sometimes you can tell from the charges. That's not particularly true in this case, but usually the leadership or the most prominent folks are the top of the list. So the number one defendant is usually the leader, and that's true in this case as well. It's kind of unusual. We've got women. It's an unfortunate expression of girl power, which I'm all for, but you know, that used to be very unusual. You would rarely see women be prominently involved in drug trafficking. That's not true anymore. It's an equal opportunity malady.
But you can't say what gangs yet.
I told you ABT, but I'm not briefed up on what black gangs might be involved. Yes, sir.
For the female leaders, are they ABT or they're the other ones?
Well, ABT is a men's organization. They have a female complement called the Featherwoods. That's all I can say about that. There are no female ABT members there. Yeah, for whatever.
Sir, are you able to characterize these arrests as chiefs, lieutenants, foot soldiers?
These are prominent street-level methamphetamine dealers here. They're going to hopefully lead us to bigger dealers in Dallas. And our objective, and we've done it many, many times, is to end up finding out who did this in Mexico and indicting them. You know, that's a whole other package, of course, to talk about and to actually accomplish. But we're doing it all the time. And that's our objective in this case. All right. If there's no other questions, we'll hang around briefly. This is Davlin Walston. She's my press information officer. Of course, she's the handy one with all the indictments. And Jim, do we have that third indictment released yet? Okay, not unsealed. I'm sorry about that. We will get that done today, and you'll get it by email or fax as we normally do. But thank you very much for your attention. Folks, anybody else? All right, we'll hang around for a little while. Thank you. Appreciate it. We're adjourned.